Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be looking at continuing our verbal reasoning run through as such, and so this is the kind of the last video in terms of finishing this section of verbal reasoning. So I'm going to be taking you guys through three passages, so it's a little bit longer. This video will be a little bit longer than the usual length, and once again the idea behind doing this kind of like slow walkthrough is to be able to show you guys exactly how I would approach the questions in a little bit more of a slower manner. Because normally when I do these walkthroughs, if I do a live VR mock as such, you wouldn't really be able to see exactly what I'm doing as such, because I guess I'm mumbling a lot of the time. I'm a little bit unsure about exactly what's going on. Sorry, you guys therefore might not be as sure about what's going on exactly. But let's have a look at this one. Okay, so first passage. So I'll be honest, I probably would skip this passage. It is divided into paragraphs, which is one of the things I like, but it's still quite long. But let's have a look at this. So based on the info in the passage, women who cycled during and after First World War were regarded as immoral. So I'd probably skip this question because we're looking for, like, yes, it does mention First World War, but I think there's two areas. It's probably likely because with most of these like historical or article passages, you normally the questions the passage is written so it's in chronological order. So I'm gonna have to look at probably two separate areas. So I'm gonna skip this. I'm gonna come back to this one. So, the medical condition known as bicycle face was especially serious for women. Great. So, bicycle face, that's what I'm looking for. So, the role of the bicycle in the emancipation of women was to give women the freedom to travel while freeing them from body-crushing corsets and billowing skirts. As suffragettes said, bicycles did more to emancipate women than anything. Precarious penny-farthing bicycles were followed in the 80s by a safety bicycle that could be used by anyone. Historians see the 90s as the golden age of the bicycle. The South Wales Echo still claimed in 87 that women should be aware of the danger of cycling. The prospect of saddle between ladies' legs is considered scandalous, linked to sexual immorality. Doctors warn cyclists about bicycle face. Okay? And so here, and one of the things is like, it's not like you read the question and then you can only look at the paragraph. You can of course flick your eyes back and forth, which I often find myself doing. So known as bicycle face was especially serious for women. So an affliction which affected men and women equally. So let's keep reading. But it was considered particularly upsetting for women. Set faces, eyes fixed before them, and an anxious, irritable expression. So I would argue that when it says a medical condition known as bicycle face, especially serious for women, that's false because it was affected them equally. It was just more upsetting, but that's not about seriousness, right? If it affects men and women equally, that's fine. It's not more serious for women. Okay, in the golden age of the bicycle, dangers associated with early types of bicycle have been largely overcome. So this is where our memory has to kind of come into play. So I remember reading that over here, so I can read around it. Okay, so dangers, early types of bicycle largely overcome. So let me read around it from the start. So precarious penny farthing bicycle. So already I'm kind of getting hints in terms of the language here. Were followed in the 80s by a safety bicycle that could be used by anyone. Historians see the 90s as the golden age. Okay, so dangers associated with earlier types of bicycle had been largely overcome. I would agree, because in the 80s, if we have a safety bicycle, and the golden age of the 90s, then yeah, we probably have overcome those earlier type of dangers. So I'd say this is probably true. The emancipation of women by the bicycle was most significant in terms of the changes achieved in how women dressed. Okay, so one thing I'd say is normally for questions like this, where it says most, or like, when they're very, very definitive, in that last question, it was like largely overcome. It didn't say well, completely overcome as such. For more definitive ideas, you'd normally guess that it's going to be one of these two. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. I probably will do this one. So let's keep going. So women cyclists recognize their dress had to change. Corsets, crinoline, and petticoats had to be discarded. In 1881, the Society for Rational Dress was formed, opposing women's restricted clothing, especially but not only for cycling. The new woman with her bicycle and rational clothing became a figure of ridicule and scorn. When Cambridge University proposed granting women full admission to the Union in 1897, male students protested with an effigy of a woman on a bicycle, perhaps fearing the rejection of traditional gender roles. Later, the women laughed at absurd medical quackery and were scornful to their critics. Soon they came to be recognized as sensible modern ladies. During the First World War, women took on men's jobs, and finally their dress changed. Louise J. wrote in 1895, "A new dawn of emancipation is brought about by the cycle. Free to wheel, free to spin out in the glorious country, the young girl to take and feel the real independence of the self-free cycle." So here, the relevant info was right at the end. So the emancipation was most significant in terms of the changes achieved in how women dressed. I would say this is going to be, I can't tell, because it says emancipation was brought about by the cycle. We don't know if it was just that. Surely women's dress changing could also be a big part of that. Okay. Actually, no, that doesn't make sense, because the question reads, emancipation of women by the bicycle was most significant in terms of the changes achieved in how women dress. No, but I think there could be other factors. We just don't know enough about this, which is why I can't tell. And it goes back to the idea of what I was saying about the guesstimation kind of thing, the fact that because they've mentioned it, because it says most, you can almost kind of guess that it's going to be wrong. So based on the information in the passage, women who cycled during and after First World War were regarded as immoral. So immediately I know this is false, because I remember reading they were scornful to their critics and they came to be recognized as sensible modern ladies. And then it says the First World War they took on men's jobs, and so yeah, this is got to be wrong. Okay, cool. So yeah, let's keep going. Okay, so once again, definite skip. Okay, I would 100% skip. So actually, let me do it realistically. I guess I'll go forwards, and I will get to the next passage. So I would skip this one, go to this one. Okay, I mean this one's not as great, but I like to read the first line sometimes just to figure out what it's about. And it says climate change. So actually, you know what? I'm a little bit happier about this one. So based on the challenge, which are the following statements about climate change, the writer most likely to agree with. So here, I'm going to skip this one because this is like based on the passage and it got four different ideas. Let's see if I can think about something specific. Okay, an advantage specific to tabletop games. They give people the chance to participate in activity together. Players have to make decisions and consider their consequences. By bringing people face to face, they allow for better communication. Their content is of greater educational value than other games. Okay, so I'd probably rule out D. I would say specific to tabletop games, I would say perhaps. I feel like you have to do this in a lot of games, and I would say that you can participate in. Actually, I'd probably say somewhere between A and C, but let's keep going. So that's where tabletop games may help. These games, board games, card games, role-playing games, anything that we played around a table, have a unique ability to engage players in complex systems. Games engage our brains in different ways than just hearing news about climate disasters. They can prepare us to make better choices. Climate crisis games pull players into possible scenarios where real-life choices shape our current and future climate. They can introduce people to the effects of the climate crisis and foster dialogue, providing a shared experience that players can discuss, debate, and learn from. While digital and online games are also a powerful way of generating conversations about the climate crisis, the very act of getting around a table to play tabletop games means they create a more immediate opportunity for actual talking and collaborating. So based on this info, I think C is probably going to be the answer. Okay, let's keep going. What does the writer imply about games in the magic circle? Okay, so once again, we've got a very specific keyword as such. So this is a question that I'm more than happy to do. And so I didn't remember reading anything about Magic Circle yet. So if we keep going, you can see it's immediately here. So in gaming theory, the Magic Circle refers to the psychological space where normal rules and realities are suspended and replaced by the game's artificial reality. This allows players to experiment with different strategies and outcomes without real-world consequences. In the context of the climate crisis, it can serve as a powerful tool. Okay, so based off this, I would say A is probably wrong. I think B might, because that's the one that talks about without real world consequences. But let's keep reading in case I can change anything else. So games can also foster opportunities for roleplay, allowing players to experience the world from different perspectives. This can foster empathy and understanding around the climate crisis. So yeah, I think B is the one that makes. Like I'm not 100% sure on it, but remember one of the things I said. Even if you're not 100% sure on a question, fine, just leave it as it is, right? Flag it. So I'm going to try and flag it here, and then move on. Right? It's better to do that than to take those extra 20, 30 seconds and further deliberate over your answer and probably end up not making much headway anyways, if that makes sense. Okay, let's keep going. So all of the following ideas are addressed in the passage except having fun leads to more effective learning. Okay, alarming people can have a positive impact. Being able to see other points of view is useful. People need to realize what they're capable of. So, once again, so this is probably the most generic. So once again, it says all the following are addressed, but I haven't finished reading the passage here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to go back to that first question, see if I can answer that first. Which of the following statements is the writer most likely to agree with? If the public are told about their effects, they'll know how to deal with it. What exactly should be done about it is fairly obvious to most people. The issue is too complicated for the general public to fully understand. It's worth trying different approaches. I think this is going to be the answer because the whole idea here was to talk about tabletop games, which is I find is a really weird way to try and solve climate change. But I guess it raises awareness, right? So I'd say D is probably the answer. Now I'm going to go back to that last bit. So, do I remember reading about any of these others here? So let's have a look. Being able to see other people's points of view is useful. So I remember reading this here. So here, experience the world from different perspectives. So I know that's wrong. Okay. It says a lot of people can have positive impact. People need to realize what they're capable of. So I'm going to keep going. Read the final bit. So games can serve as a potent tool for instilling the notion of taking effective action when it comes to climate change. Experiencing a scary imaginary future in a game can inspire people to take action in the real world. So alarming people can have a positive impact. It's probably going to be true. Crucially, games create a sense of agency, showing that their actions can make a difference. Okay, so D is true as well. So A is going to be the answer. I guess, actually, I probably should have guesstimated that the answer was going to be A, because it doesn't really make sense otherwise to, yeah, A just doesn't really make sense at all, I guess, about, yeah, anything really here. Yeah, that's probably what I'd say. Okay, cool. Um, let's go back to that other passage then. So And by the way, guys, maybe I should just do it properly as such. But what I normally do is when I'm going through, let's say I've done my first run through, I've left out 2 or 3 passages, whatever it is, I'm not sure. There's no exact number I do in VR, it just depends on the passages. Oh, never mind. But normally, if you go to the end screen, there'll be a button here that says reviewing complete. That's what I love to press because it basically just allows you to hyperfixate on the ones you haven't done. That's really, really important to do. Okay, so based on the information, Australia's first steam rail was built in 1854 in Melbourne because. Okay, so we've got a specific idea here. So I can probably do this question, but this is quite long, so I'll be honest, I probably won't do it immediately. I'm just trying to see if there's a faster question. So when the decision was made to first construct the first steam railway line, the principal investors were. Okay, this one's perhaps a little bit easier to do. First deal round was opened in Melbourne, Victoria in 1854, following meetings with local people. Shares were offered at £50 each, at least 6,100 Australian dollars. Today, railways were thought as a good way of making money. With the growing population nearby Ballarat goldfields, Melbourne was booming. Plan was to move people and goods between the port and the city and reduce the high cost of shipping goods up the Yarra River. So actually, maybe now if I go back, anything about moving people? Determined to beat its rival, that's wrong. Or travel by train. This one, I think this one's going to be the answer if anything, because it says the plan was to move people and goods. So I think that's probably the main reason why. So you can see here, like, it's important to bear in mind what the question was. So I didn't actually read the answers here, but like, I remember reading about like why it was built specifically. So this is what I mean about having to bear in mind some of the questions. So I wouldn't necessarily say for every single question set that you have to read through all 4 of the questions first before you go to answer. No, you don't have to do that. But here it just worked out this way. So when the decision was made to construct, the principal investors were, okay, let's keep going. So the 4-kilometre broad gauge 1600mm track ran from Flinders Street Station across the Yarra River to Sandridge Pier, now Port Melbourne. A year after Melbourne, Sydney opened the first line in New South Wales. Many railway lines were poorly planned and never likely to prosper. In 1865, the original railway company absorbed 2 others, but then in 1878, where would I go? Some lines have gone back from the colonial government made it part of Victorian Railways. The line from the Flinders Street Station to Port Melbourne was electrified in the 20th century and it's now Route 109 with a passenger tram network on a standard gauge with platforms lowered at different stops. Expanding railways allowed free movement of people and goods. Settlements developed along major railways and encouraged economic growth, prompting Australians and visitors to travel longer distances to work or for leisure. However, each colony had adopted its own gauge, and devices which would allow trains to run on different gauges were rebuffed by rail managers, supposedly because few people travelled beyond their own locality. When the Commonwealth of Australia was established in 1901, the colonies against states, the short-sightedness of having 3 gauges, narrow, standard, and broad, became evident. In 1917, a person wanting to cross the continent had to change trains 6 times. Only by 1970 could a passenger remain the same train. Okay, so actually, I probably messed up a little bit here because I've read through it and I didn't really find anything. Especially this last bit was talking about more about the buildings and stuff, which probably makes me think it's going to be up here. Actually, if I have a quick glance up here, it says following a meeting with local people offered at £50 each. So if anything, this is going to be wrong. The principal investors are probably just wealthy individuals, I'd say, because a meeting of local people in Victoria. So yeah, I think C has to be the answer. But I wasted a little bit of time there, fine. But it's still technically not a waste of time as long as I can remember some of the things that I remember reading, which, I'll be completely honest, I don't know if I can remember exactly, but let's keep going. This one looks a bit long, so let's do this one. Okay, that one also looks long. So all the following statements are correct concerning development of railways in the Melbourne area. So true to its belief, the initial company had organised its affairs well and had successfully taken over other lines. I remember reading that, so it absorbed the other lines or something. Yeah, absorbed 2 others. Yeah, which had gone bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the many rail lines established in a wave of enthusiasm would lack the careful selection of it. I remember reading that as well. Yeah, I think, yeah, I remember reading that roughly. Okay, let's keep going. So some railway companies went to bankruptcy. The only organisations found. Okay, yes, I think that's true. So here, colonial government made it part of Victorian Railways. Yeah. So I guess we got 2 pieces of info from that one area. The colonial government wanted the state to be in charge of railways so it can make a profit. So I guess if those 3 are true, it has to be this one. But let's read this. So it can make a profit from passenger fares and charges for the crowded freight. Well, it doesn't really say anything about that. Obviously, there was a lot of belief in profit and they knew that a lot of money was available as such, but I don't necessarily think that there's a reason to believe that. Yeah, I think, yeah, no, I don't necessarily think that that's the reason. I guess the central government, I mean, the colonial government, like, bailed out the railway, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Keep going. So, according to the author, the single biggest problem the long-distance travelers faced in the early 20th century was a lack of coordination and timetabling for the inactivity. The different gauges retained different, necessitating a change of trains whenever the gauge of the track changed. Okay, so remember, this is something that we remember reading about. Remember, right at the bottom is the idea that passenger could remain on the same train. Let's keep going. The freight traffic seemed to be given priority, so the demands of traders, limited toilet arrangements. Okay, I think the answer is going to be B. Let's talk about it here. Change trains 6 times. Yeah, I think that's what I would put. So you can see here I've kind of, I'm not doing the questions necessarily in an order. The only thing I would really specify that you guys do, make sure you either do a set or you don't, right? So don't do a couple of questions and then leave the rest. Like either do a set or you don't, and try and stick to that logic, because you can see that by doing some of the early questions, you gain knowledge and you remember things, which are 100% really important and useful for the later questions. Okay, cool. So thank you as always for watching. Please let me know if you do have any other questions, but otherwise take care guys, and I will see you in the next video.